Hi, my name is Natasha Treneff, and I'm so pleased to have my friend, Dr. Jannine Krause, here with me today to discuss gut health and hormones. And her specialty is hormones. My specialty has been probiotics and the health of the gut. So I think we're going to be handling some interesting questions that have been posed to her and to me, and it's just a friendly discussion. And I hope you gained a lot of insight and information that you need for your gut and hormone health from today's interaction. So, Jannine, welcome, and please ask your questions, and let's see if we can get to the root cause of these problems.
Absolutely. Thanks, Natasha, for having me on to have a conversation with you. It's so important for us to talk about the questions that we get because, as we mentioned before we hit record, there are so many confusing topics out there. And one of the biggest things that I hear from women over and over again is, okay, so my hormones are off, doc. I've heard that my hormones have something to do with these gut bugs, and I see this product on the shelf that says 4 hormones. Is that the one I should be taking? Give us your scoop on that and your take.
Yeah, well, I've been in this industry for well over 50 years, and I've been assigned to organizations, and we used to sit on something called the Standards Committee. And the Standards Committee would evaluate products that were being sold in the dietary supplement industry. And unfortunately for all of us, 80% of the time, repeatedly, the active ingredients were not inside the box or the bottle that they claimed on the label. That's problem number one. Problem number two is that the lack of understanding of the interaction between hormones and gut bacteria and which gut bacteria are essential for healthy hormone production and the prevention of disease, because the articles are telling us that hormones will interact with pathogens to cause fertility problems, to cause organ diseases like ovarian cancer. And we have to be very careful whose information we listen to, even if they're titled, even if it's a doctor, because unfortunately, doctors are not taught about the microbiome or even probiotics or anything in depth in medical school. They just pick up information, what I call this is horizontal knowledge, that they read somewhere and then they extrapolate without having vertical knowledge, understanding these organisms, how they need to be fermented, what is a fermented food, various probiotic organism that cannot be fermented by individuals in their kitchen and will lead to a host of other problems, but that requires specialty training and knowing how to ferment these organisms. And they can only be used as dietary supplement because they were not designed as something we called starter cultures. And since I've set the standard in the state of California for yogurt in 1969, helped to set the kefir standard in the state of New York in the 70s, and then set the probiotic labeling standard voted on by thousands of members of the National Nutritional Foods Association. And that was later read into congressional record. I think I know what I'm talking about. And so it's much more important now to understand the importance of the right probiotic bacteria, the ones that have evolved with Homo sapiens, that have been in the literature for at least 100 years and are not used to treat symptoms. Because remember, bacteria or yeast are one-celled brains. They're extremely intelligent, and us not understanding them can lead to a host of health problems that we cannot reverse. So we have to be very careful to know exactly what we're doing.
That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. You think about like the colonization of certain microbes, and folks will think about, oh, I've got an underlying infection of something. We could potentially have an underlying infection of a microbe that we ingested excess of if we supplemented it. Is that correct?
Yes. In fact, without getting into great detail, we can do a more in-depth study at a later date. But for instance, even supplementing with progesterone has been shown to stimulate the growth of certain pathogens. And that's why some people, when they supplement incorrectly with a hormone, it may lead to a disease because it stimulated a pathogen that will cause that cancer or that autoimmune disease.
That's interesting because I noticed that a lot of folks who come to me who have taken bioidentical hormones, whether it's progesterone, testosterone, or estrogen, they often will say, Doc, I've had a side effect, or I don't feel good. My gut doesn't feel good. My skin doesn't look good. I don't feel good on these. And of course, my job is to go back and go, what is the issue? And oftentimes we're going back to liver and gut. And of course, what I'd love to get your insight in on today is the microbiome associated with our hormones, which
Yeah,
is important.
it is. It absolutely is. One of the major functions of the correct microbiome, and a lot of us, I would say in North America, more than 90% have not what I call an optimal gut microbiome. And the gut microbiome is responsible for recycling the hormones to make them bioavailable to the body, and also can stimulate the production of hormones or deny the production of hormones depending on which group of microbes have the upper hand in the GI tract. So what I have told people that you need to be restoring the balance of the gut microbiome with the right bacteria, the bacteria that's been in the literature for at least 100 years that we know evolved with Homo sapiens. And under countless research, thousands of articles have never caused any detrimental effects in the human host. Where we get into a dangerous territory is when we start using probiotic bacteria to treat symptoms, because you have no idea what other things will happen in the gut if you're using a very strong bacterium to treat a symptom. You may get rid of that symptom, but you have no idea what other problems may be caused by you ingesting that bacteria, because either the doctor is ignorant who's telling you to take that bacteria. And I mean ignorant because they don't understand the field of probiotics or microbiology adequately. And they do it in good faith because some company or some sales representative showed them some clinical data that they think that covers that use. But you have to consider that microbes are, in it for themselves. If they're helping you, it's to help themselves. And until you understand this, we're going to continue to have these problems. And that's why I'm saying that I only stick to Lactobacillus acidophilus, which has been found, countless research articles, to be beneficial to both men and women in the utilization of their hormones, the recycling of their hormones, and the production of their hormones, with no what I call deleterious side effects. So that's very important. You can't use what I call these designer organisms that people call probiotics, and they selectively choose articles that support whatever their point of view is. However, they don't give you the whole context of that scientific research, so you understand what the consequences are as well. Because there's always a pro and a con with whatever organism you use. And that's why for 50 years, I've only stuck with the use of 4 microbes, not because I know less, but because I've studied this field in depth, reviewed thousands of articles, have set standards for fermented foods, which are completely different than the organisms we designate as probiotics. For instance, some of the organisms we talked about that you were telling me about, like Lactobacillus gasseri, Lactobacillus reuteri, are not starter cultures. And people attempting to grow this in their kitchen are asking for trouble, because these organisms have to be stabilized and grown under very specific conditions. Otherwise, whatever is in the milk or whatever substance you're trying to ferment, those background bacteria are the ones that are going to grow, because that's why you have to refrigerate food, because you have to stop the growth of the organisms that are inherent in every food, especially if it's organic, because the more organic the food is, the more natural bacteria background noise they have, which most people don't know. And what does refrigeration do? It slows down the growth so that the food doesn't become spoiled. So those same organisms that are the background organisms in the food are the ones most likely to grow, because they're already familiar with that substance, and not the ones that you use as a starter culture, which will not waste their cellular energy to impress us by fermenting something that they don't feel like fermenting, or they have no interest in fermenting. So that there's the danger where we think that organisms are stupid and they're going to behave because we do something to them. That's so ridiculous. I can't even begin to tell you how ridiculous it is. And that's where we get into trouble in Western societies, because I think people are well-meaning, but unless they know fermented foods and they understand how probiotics are grown, they can make these suggestions, but nobody's going to profit from these suggestions and potentially can be harmed.
That makes incredible sense. You don't think about, and I think probably because of our marketing, things of that nature, folks think supplements, they're harmless. The other big thing that I get questioned, or basically a statement I hear, I should say, all the time is like, supplements are natural, so they're not going to hurt me. Or people will say supplements are natural, they're not going to hurt me, right?
Mhm.
And with probiotics, I never quite thought about the fact that they are single-celled organisms that are on a mission for themselves. And so
Mhm.
this is a huge concept. So when we look at Lactobacillus acidophilus and we're like, okay, we could use Lactobacillus acidophilus to help us to balance our microbiome. What format would you say would be something for someone to start with? Say if they are having issues with hormones, but also having a digestive system that maybe they're more prone towards constipation, which does tend to be something I see more often than the other side of things
Mhm.
with women as we get older.
Well, look, since I've been doing this for a long time, just saying that you have a Lactobacillus acidophilus doesn't mean it's going to perform, or it's the right strain, or it has been grown according to its criteria, not what you think is right. So
Hmm.
this is the problem. People say, and most people shy away from Lactobacillus acidophilus because it's difficult to grow, difficult to stabilize, and you have to meet its criteria. But once it's in the body, and if it's handled correctly, it is a miraculous organism. It's truly miraculous. And I've seen that was the first organism I used to introduce the whole field of probiotics in 1982. And the acidophilus then I'll recommend some protocols or some regimens that people can follow. So the acidophilus has been used, that we use in our product, in a Yale University nursing school study where they gave this Lactobacillus acidophilus that I call the NAS strain to women who had AIDS and had vaginal yeast overgrowth. And our products were used vaginally, and the product did as well as the drug metronidazole. And that was a stunning thing that they found in the nursing study. And nobody wanted to conduct any further studies, because now this showed that a dietary supplement, especially a living organism, if produced correctly, can be as effective as a drug with no harm.
Hmm. Wow. Wow. I
Yeah.
mean, that's huge. That's
That is
huge.
huge. So that's what I'm saying, that not only did I choose the right strain of Lactobacillus acidophilus, I grew it according to what it wants in order to produce hydrogen peroxide, natural antimicrobials, natural peptides, natural amino acids that will communicate with the immune cells on the intestinal wall and will do its job to maintain vaginal health, prostate health, and really help become a much more functioning human being, whether you're male or female.
Very interesting. Very
Mhm.
interesting. So I'm thinking to myself, and this is something that, of course, I've worked with my clients. Let's get your
Mhm.
gut microbiome dialed in before we try to use bioidentical hormones, before we try to add anything else to the mix.
Mhm.
Lactobacillus would be one step. Of course, your healthy trinity is something that I always think about as well. How, you were saying you're going to mention some protocols. I would love to hear kind of what's your take on balancing the microbiome when we're looking at hormones? What would you do? What have you done? How about that?
Well, I've done it very simply. I have something called the Healthy Start Kit.
Mhm.
And in that Healthy Start Kit, I have the Lactobacillus acidophilus grown in a chickpea base. And the reason I chose chickpeas is because it has the same composition of proteins and carbohydrates. And the reason it's called a lactobacillus is because it loves milk. So anytime you substitute its favorite substance that it wants to grow on, it has to resemble that substance. Otherwise, it's not going to express the beneficial byproducts that you want for your health. So I tell people take a teaspoon of the Lactobacillus acidophilus, and the retail label is Megadophilus, and you have a teaspoon of the Digestalac, which is the Lactobacillus bulgaricus, and drink those in unchilled filtered water before meals in 4 to 8 ounces of water, however much water you want. And this will also magically stimulate your peristalsis. And if you do have constipation or slow movement, this will help it. And then I tell them to take the bifidobacter, which is the bifidobacteria. Take 2 teaspoons of that right before you go to bed. And that is very important because it quiets the function of the liver, and the liver really controls your circadian rhythm, because if it's busy neutralizing toxins, it's going to keep you awake. So if the liver is allowed to be quiet and, rest during the night, because there's help with the bifidobacteria, you're going to have a much more restful and easy time falling asleep.
That's something that obviously women will struggle with, the sleep, as we get older. And I'm wondering if maybe it's not necessarily a deficiency of a hormone. In some cases, maybe we're missing a little bit of bifidobacterium there.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So the beauty of what I've created, and that's why I can't go to the next level, because people don't even understand what I have now.
Yeah.
And it's still 20 years ahead of anything that's on the market. And that's a shame, because we need these type of products more than ever. So I tell people, when you've gone through this program for several weeks, then add the Healthy Trinity both in the morning and at night, because it's such a mess inside our GI tract. And remember, I didn't create the mess. If only 7% of the women in North America have a bifidobacterium infantis to transmit to their child, even if it's vaginally born and breastfed, we got a whole lot of trouble. We got people with messed up microbiomes. They're throwing in their organism that are treating symptoms. They're not adding to the holistic health of the microbiome, or what we call the microbiota. Remember, you have microbiomes throughout your body, and your skin is usually an indicator that something that's not right inside your body. In fact, Chinese medicine can pinpoint a skin problem to the exact location in the intestinal tract. So we know when the skin's flaring up, there's something odd going on in your intestinal tract. And getting, product that is in a pretty pink box, or that's labeled for women, for men, for children, for adults. What I say very simply, I have only 4 microorganisms. Those organisms have evolved with Homo sapiens. They're safe for infants. They're safe for toddlers. They're used by teenagers. They're used by women. They're used by men. They're used by old people. It's not a marketing position. It's a science position. And all you need is the different delivery systems, because you've got 27 feet of GI tract. In fact, your small intestine, which is 20 feet long, can be stretched out over a tennis court. So you have a whole bunch of those attachment sites in there that need to be handled. So I give the challenge to people, before you go on hormone supplementation, use my protocol for at least a month. Get on a low carb diet. Forget about alcohol. Think about your body. Your body is not a trash dump. That's how we treat it. We dump stuff in it without knowing that, hey, I need this body, because who in the heck wants to be 80 and live in a nursing home? Not me.
No.
As a matter of fact, on November 17th, I just turned 76, and I'm still working 8 to 10 hours a day. So that's my choice. But I'm saying, if my brain wasn't intact and I didn't have my strength, how in the world could I do my job?
It would be very difficult. It would be very difficult. And
Yeah.
the fact that, I mean, obviously your skin is beautiful. If we looked at you and just had to guess, I wouldn't have guessed 76. That's for sure. And of
Mhm.
course, what woman doesn't want to look younger, look amazing as long as they possibly can? And yes, like you mentioned, I mean, this is one of the other big things that I work with in my practice is living well for life, not just living well for a little bit and then letting it all go to crap.
Yep.
So I think what a lot of people might want to be interested in, let's put it this way, is Natasha. So obviously at 76, you've gone through menopause.
No, I haven't.
No.
I'm not menstruating, but I just stopped menstruating one day. I didn't have any of the symptoms. I didn't go jumping off my bed and jumping up and down because I had hot flashes. No, I'm very fortunate I didn't go through that.
Wow, no symptoms whatsoever. That's awesome. And what about, if I may ask, what about bioidentical hormone replacement therapy? None of
I
it?
never used it because, in my case, I have a secondary genetic predisposition to hypercoagulation. So I was never allowed to use hormones.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, there you go. I mean, a lot
And
of
by the way, I have not done anything surgical to my face and no chemical peels. So I haven't injected myself with anything. I've just taken care of my skin with the right nutrients, but and done facials, but I have never injected anything into my face or done anything surgically.
that's huge.
Oh, and that's what I think people need to know, because if you trash your body, what do you expect?
Mhm.
If you treat your body like a trash can, that's what you're going to have. It's going to be expressing in your energy level. And remember, I tell people, if genes caused disease or cancer, you would be born with that disease or cancer. Genes are a plan, and the
Mhm.
plan doesn't get turned off unless you do one of three things: your perception of reality, the toxins the microbes in your gut produce or in your body, or the toxins you ingest via air, water, and food, period. Those genes do not turn themselves on and off. They're just plans. And the plans don't function unless you put them into function. So that's why I'm saying it may sound simplistic, but so far nobody's doing too well, because the chronic disease state in our country is at 80%, and we're spending $4.3 trillion on healthcare. So I tell people, how good is that doing for you? Now we got young people with colon cancer. Do you know 50 years ago when I started operating, nobody knew about colon cancer? Nobody knew about pancreatic cancer. In fact, cancer, even when we were smoking and eating red meat, was nowhere near the levels it is now today.
Mhm. Mhm.
So something is wrong.
Something's drastically wrong, and especially in terms of how fast we're aging too, and in
Yeah.
terms of just illness, like you said, cancers, things of that nature.
Mhm.
Now, I think a lot of people, I asked you on my podcast, but I want to recap it
Sure.
here. Folks are probably wondering, okay, so Natasha, how many probiotic capsules do you take a day? What are you taking a day? They want to know, and I think it's very important to indicate how, that we're all individual here. But
Yeah, and I'm
I
not
think
pushing people who know me. In fact, my crew always accuses me of being the worst marketer because I don't know. I sell with my heart. I don't sell with my mind. So I take about 8 healthy trinities a day, and I take about several teaspoons of the other probiotics 3 times a day. And it's only because I've turned 76 and my body needs more support. Because
Mhm.
remember, every minute your body is producing 10 million new cells. You have an opportunity to rebuild your body every year. We've been sold a lot of lies that our body's deficient, that it's incapable of healing itself. It's absolutely not true. If you give your body the tools, it has to produce healthy proteins. If it produces cheap proteins because you think badly, you don't have the right food, you don't have the right nourishment, it's not disseminated throughout your body, then what do you expect? You're going to produce cheap hormones, and sooner or later, those cheap hormones are going to form disease because you become vulnerable to the pathogens that are you're either ingesting, inhaling, or coming into contact with. And it's the same thing that happens whenever we feast. I tell people it's not rocket science. If you're going to overeat, you're going to have to help your digestion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're going to have to take a lot more of the healthy trinity and the powders in order to help your body overcome the amount of fuel you're dumping into your body that it can't break down and utilize. And you certainly don't want it to store it because that's excess weight. And you need to feel full of energy after you eat, not completely exhausted.
Which is
And-
so classic for the big day of Thanksgiving. Everyone passed out on the couch,
right.
quite comatose.
Yeah. And that's not good because that comatose is destroying your cellular structure.
Mhm.
There is something very wrong going on. And I tell people if you eat right, you slow down, you chew your food 10 times. By the way, this is also going to affect how your hormones are produced and absorbed. This kind of assault on your body, it's not only going to impede your immune system, it's going to impede your hormone production. And what we have to get rid of in the alternative health food industry is to stop giving products to treat symptoms. We
Mhm.
have to establish overall health. And once you've uh, cleared your microbiome, you're not going to be dead tired after Thanksgiving. And I tell people after 10 or 20 minutes, go out for a walk, sit with your family, put your cell phone in a basket, put it away. You need to, we've lost human contact that is so important to overall health. It's not just to hormone health. The fact that we're not talking to each other, that we don't have meaningful exchanges is affecting our health. It's actually affecting the health of our microbiome, but people don't understand that your thoughts and your emotional state produces chemicals that will either destroy your microbiome or assist it.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I think a lot of folks, as we're headed into perimenopause beyond, and even just in general, there's a lot of
Mhm.
anxiety right now. There's a lot of depression right now. Let's talk about that a little bit in that connection.
Yeah, well, depression is what I call a two-pronged assault. You get depressed because your life is not the way you want it to be. Okay, that's it. Young people get depressed because they're deprived companionship. Then companionship means love. They're deprived love. So when you're depressed, you're producing chemicals that is detrimental to the well-being of your microbiome. And as you're eating food that's also destructive to your microbiome, you're also now hitting it with a double whammy because the microbiome, if it's healthy, is going to produce chemicals like serotonin. About 90% of your serotonin is produced in your gut, 50% of your dopamine, precursors for the production of GABA and tryptophan, just to name a few, is all made in the gut. And that sends up the vagus nerve, which is connected from your stomach to the back of your brain. And by the way, I used to have heated debates with people that told me that the gut brain barrier would not allow microbes to get inside the brain. They're
Hmm.
wrong because
Yeah.
yeah, well, let me tell you, that was about 12 years ago. I was lecturing at a university and there was people that walked out when I told them there is no such thing as a gut brain barrier, that the blood will flow and the microbes will find a way to get in. And right now, the latest science says we have bacteria in the neural composition of our brain. We have fungal organisms, which has been found in Alzheimer's patients. So these disease problems are happening because we have allowed the microbiome to go astray and the wrong characters to take possession of certain areas in our body by our thought, by our interaction with each other, with the chemicals we're producing because of the food and our perception of reality. And all of that creates a very hostile environment where you have to now take a holistic approach to fixing that by changing your thought process, meditating, if you believe prayer, if change your diet, stop being addicted to your to your electronic devices so you don't produce the wrong chemicals. Because if you're feeling anxious all the time, all the blood flow will go to your extremities. your digestion will not get the blood flow. Your immune system will not get the blood flow. And guess what? Your body will not be producing the hormones you need. It's like a spiral downward that you're engaging in. And what we're doing is we're mimicking orthodox medicine by trying to take care of the symptoms and not following the thing we were taught more than 50 years ago, that the body has to be fixed from the bottom up. You can't be treating symptoms and expect the symptom control to make you healthy. Symptom control is only necessary if you're in a crisis. I only want to be somewhere where Western medicine is dispensed if, God forbid, I was in an accident, I fell down, and I needed immediate surgery or I needed immediate help. That's all that Western medicine is good for. And we have to make that delineation. So if we follow the path in the dietary supplement industry, where we're taking things to treat a symptom, we're getting into the same problem.
Yep. Yep.
And maybe that's why we have all these chronic illnesses.
It's definitely what I suspect is going on. And I'll admit, as a naturopathic, you find yourself almost borderlining between the symptom treatment and the natural treatment because society drives that. And unfortunately, at this stage of the game, I'm not playing that anymore. Where if people don't want to hang out and do the work and put in the due diligence, we're just not a good fit. So, what I think a lot of folks right now might be thinking, Natasha, is like, okay, all right, I can get behind that. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to balance from the bottom up, and probiotics of a quality source are probably a good place to start.
Yeah. Precision probiotics, to start with a good thing. There's 3 things that tell people: change your diet, get into the right precision probiotic supplementation, and start meditating. Change your view of the world. And you'll be amazed how your health changes.
I can attest to that. I definitely, some years ago wasn't 100% in on changing the view and the mindset, but boy, the more I've been doing it, the better things just keep getting. So
Yeah. I had to study some quantum physics because I was very interested in how thoughts create reality, because that also affects the microbiome. You know that the microbes, which are more than 50% of our cellular structure. In other words, we got about 100 trillion microbes in our gut, and the latest finding says we have 50 trillion cells. So they're an alien entity in our body. Our body cannot produce them. That's the one thing our body cannot produce. And that's what I tell people. That's the one thing where we have to create this holistic unity between the microbes in our body to give our body the daily necessities that it needs that keep it healthy and functioning.
So vitally important. And as you mentioned, multiple research studies and long-term research, which I think is something that we've kind of been, for lack of a better term, brainwashed to ignore long-term and only want the recent stuff. And I think, we need to look back and go over the span of, like you've said, hundreds plus years. We have data that shows us over and over again, lactobacillus, and
which
how
one is Acidophilus? Because, there's the genus Lactobacillus. And I want to touch something we talked about before we started this. And this, believe it or not, guys, this does have an effect on hormones. You were asking me whether or not you could use a Lactobacillus reuteri or a Lactobacillus gasseri or a Bacillus coagulans to ferment foods. And I say no, they're not starter culture organisms. They need specific conditions, specific nutrients in order to grow. And if they did grow, they would break down the protein to such an extent that you would find it bitter and unpalatable to consume.
Very interesting.
Very
interesting.
In fact, in the dairy industry, which I come from, if you found the Bacillus coagulans in a dairy product, the Department of Agriculture will pull your product off the market because it's considered a contaminant.
Let's talk about that for a second,
Mhm.
because there is so much hype in the media right now about Bacillus coagulans and BC30 as being the very
Mhm.
marketed one out there. Let's talk about that, because a lot of people would be thinking now, like, oh, if that gets thrown out because it's a contaminant, but people tell me it's supposed to be in my gut. Is my gut contaminant? Like, what
Okay,
is?
well, it's very simple. Look, anything in the genus Bacillus was never used in the dairy industry or any in the fermented industry. It was only used in the Far East, and it was used by specific cultures under specific conditions. And that's the danger when we try to adopt things from a different culture that we have no idea or no history of use.
Hmm.
And Bacillus coagulans was chosen because it's part of the soil organisms that are called spore formers. So when it sporulates, it can defend itself up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And it doesn't have to change into a regular cellular structure if it doesn't suit its agenda. Remember, microbes only do things that suit their agenda. They're not there to impress us. So many times, and even with this, the data that's supplied on the website shows that the organism doesn't even stop sporulating, doesn't even change into a natural. So it basically leaves your body via the feces because 40% of your dry weight fecal matter is microbes and will not do any good. However, if it does sporulate and become a cell, it can change into other forms as well. And when it changes into what I call a cell wall free cell, it can become dangerous because it can adopt itself like a virus into various positions in the body. And that's why historically, if you look, your mother told you to wash your vegetables and your fruits. Why? Not to get rid of the dirt, but what was in the dirt? In the dirt were the soil organisms. If you look historically in any culture that had any kind of a health standard, the vegetables, and even if so, they're organic. If they're organic, they contain more microbes than pesticide laden because pesticides are also potent antibiotics. So not only do they kill the pests, they kill the microbes. So and then you had to get rid of the pesticide because now the pesticides has made those soil organisms much more resilient because whenever you try to kill a microbe, it evolves to protect itself. So
Yes.
now you're ingesting these soil organisms that are smarter and stronger than they were before, and they're giving you safety data based on the organism being in one particular state. Doesn't tell you what happens if it changes to adopt to a certain territory or if it can produce toxins under certain conditions. That's the danger. Not understanding the full function of that organism under all conditions. The American public is been taught or reacts to something that's easy. So the marketing people usually have it over the science people.
Yes.
They want to give people what's easy for them to use, take care of, and the science is skewed. And because there's certain things that are left out of the explanation because that doesn't go along with the marketing position.
Yes, that is a sad reality that I've seen over and over again and fought up against so much. Now, one of the things I think I'm thinking about, other folks might be thinking about right now, oh gosh, Natasha, I've taken multiple different brands of probiotics.
Mm-hmm.
What have I done? How long does it take to clear them? How do I reset? Can I reset? Am I screwed? What do I do?
No, well, nobody can answer that question because remember, your microbiome, which is the sum of all the genetic material of the microbes you have in your gut, and they have about 238,000 genes. That is pretty stable. And what you need to do is change your diet, go on the regimen I told you. You got to stay on it for well over 6 months to a year. And depends your outlook on life, what you're eating, And a lot of people, even if they eat good foods, those good foods may not agree with them. There's a lot of information coming from like websites, Dr. Gundry, about lectins and, vegetables or fruits that shouldn't be eaten because of the lectins and the oxalates in spinach and on and on and on. So people are totally confused. I
Yeah.
say go back to a simple thing. Do stop eating raw foods. Just eat your salad, which is regular lettuce, tomatoes, onions. I wouldn't even eat peppers raw anymore. And the
Huh.
rest has to be cooked, broiled, and prepared in a fashion that's palatable but broken down because our whole digestive tract has changed. So, and you will know if you learn how to listen to your body and don't have distractions 24/7, your body will tell you how it feels after you eat something. If you don't feel good quite often, I said, maybe I should eliminate this. And before you go for expensive tests in the old days, we had something called the elimination diet. If
Mm-hmm.
something you thought was causing you harm, you would eliminate for 72 hours and then reintroduce it in small amounts and see how your body reacts.
Yep. Yep.
It's just, yeah, it's staying in tune.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So huge, so huge. And definitely part of my programs is really teaching folks how to connect with their bodies, really understand the information and exactly that, reintroducing if we suspect something's a problem, we take it out, we reintroduce it. And
Mhm,
definitely goes down the lines of hormones as well, because I think that so many people, there's that interface between the food and the microbiome that
mhm.
causes issues. For sure. For sure.
Yeah, and so the hormones are part of your microbiome balance, and only if you've done everything we've talked about and you're still having hormone issues that are detected by what I call good blood tests, then and only then should you consider bioidentical hormone replacement. But it's not like the first thing you should do. You should try to fix your body before you start adding stuff in. And I know it takes longer time, but it took a long time for you to get to where you were. So don't expect a quick, snap fix on a very complex entity like your body.
Absolutely, absolutely. And same thing goes, I'm guessing, with adding in the amount of probiotic capsules, you know what you need, which I think was a fabulous statement that I want to reiterate, is that as we get older, we read these bottles and it says the, suggested dose, but unfortunately we do need to think about, especially in the case of your product, that you can go higher based on how you feel.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the bacteria has to be safe at any
Mhm.
level. Second of all, I've told people the mixing of all those organisms has nothing to do with diversity in your gut. It has to do with marketing. And
Yeah.
anytime you allow the microbes to touch each other inside the capsule, inside the bottle, it's called, instability. Instability means that some of these microbes will produce substances inside the capsule that will annihilate each other. And that's why it's important that they first of all stop putting these organisms together unless they can prove they're compatible. And the most important thing is, how do these microbes survive stomach acid? Our Healthy Trinity oil matrix has been shown by a European institute that our three bacteria survive stomach acid as low as 1.8 pH for over an hour, because
Wow.
your stomach acid was designed to digest proteins. Guess what? Microbes are proteins. So it's an ingenious function of our stomach that we're breaking down proteins to rebuild our body, but we're also killing bacteria that is prevalent in all the food that we eat, especially if it's natural.
Mhm.
So this is one thing people don't understand, that the organisms now present in natural food are much more smarter, stronger because of the pesticides and the chemicals we have used. So that's why we have to take extraordinary care, because we've unbalanced the whole environment, and it's not going to be a simple fix.
That's incredibly important to think about. And something that, I mean, on testing, when I do testing and I'm looking at certain things, I do see we've got a mess. with the food
Yep.
and how it's interacting with our microbiomes.
Yeah,
Wow.
I would suggest, get your own hydroponic garden if you don't have a large yard or live somewhere where you have snow. Start learning about the vegetables you eat. Start, learning. Now there's even a turnaround stance on whole wheat and whole grain, that it could be damaging the lining of the gut. And so it's all this information just being thrown out. No in-depth study, no in-depth proof. All I'm saying to people is, look, in Eastern Europe, we do consume white bread. It's a staple. It's not white bread that's been bleached. It's the way the wheat is. That wheat is ground and it's made into a bread with yeast. It is a staple. My Serbian and my Macedonian grandmothers, what they would have for dinner is this, homemade bread with yogurt. That was their supper. Their big meal was at noon. So that's what they would eat every day. And the people in the Balkans before World War II were considered some of the healthiest groups of people in Europe. I don't know about Asia because Asia has a different thing. And they're even talking about that's why in China and Japan, cultures that live on rice, the rice is white. So I haven't done any research on that. I don't know what the truth is. I just heard now new positions, new things coming out where they're now saying that the whole grain stuff could be damaging the lining of your gut. So I know you're you're like me, like saying, what? We all believed it.
Yeah.
So I have to go back now and evaluate everything from the bottom up.
It's what we have to do. I mean, we've been fed so much BS that it's to the point where no wonder nobody knows what to eat, how to eat, and a lot of people just give up at this point. But
Mhm.
really, you're right. Looking back at what did our ancestors and in our heritages, even I'm
Mhm.
Polish, I grew up with yogurt, I grew up with bread. I mean, I wouldn't know what to do without it. And honestly, yes, I've went gluten-free and things of that nature thinking it was going to help, and it never did
You
because
know,
it wasn't the problem.
yeah, well, remember, gluten is the protein in the bread. And since we've adulterated the wheat molecule, the thing that the immune system reacts to is anything that's a protein because bacteria are protein. That's what I try to explain to people. And also, gluten was used as a meat extender by fast food companies in large
Mm,
quantities, 20 to 30%. And probably people got a higher dose of this adulterated protein because in Italy, in France, and Eastern Europe, people don't have the same reaction to bread as they do in this country.
yeah,
That's the truth
yeah.
because they haven't hybridized their wheat, they haven't GMO'd it, and so the protein molecule is not adverse to our immune system tolerating it coming across the intestinal wall. And by the way, that is affecting your hormones. Everything your body can't digest is affecting your hormones. It's affecting everything that happens in your gut. It's not isolated. So if you're thinking, well, why is she talking about that? Because everything is interdependent and has a total effect on the body. So by taking everything out of context, that's why we're not getting anywhere.
Yep. Yeah, we're not looking at a total approach, and definitely why I'm all about folks figuring out what their body needs and whole approach because the like you said, the GMO, the hybridization, all the chemicals, the glyphosates and whatnot in the wheat. I think that's obviously the problem, not necessarily the wheat itself. It's got the bad rap. So I agree. I agree. We got to be thinking holistic.
Yeah,
We've got to be coming everything full circle.
right. And just the last thing, the last example I want to give is the peanut butter example.
Mm,
Peanuts, first of all, are legumes. They're not nuts. And there's one of the most heavily sprayed crops. So what happens, so that people understand, first you become allergic to the substance that's covering that entity, the pesticide. Your immune system has a terrible reaction. If that pesticide is not removed, then the body and the immune system becomes reactive to the substance, which is the peanut. And that's why then it develops into severe allergy that the kids go into an anaphylactic shock.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody explains to the kids or the parents why this happens. It's because the body gives you warning signals. Hey, I can't tolerate this. And you don't understand what's happening. So you keep giving peanut butter, which was a staple in American diets. When we came here, I came here as a child in the 50s. And if it's a staple in the diet and people were able to eat it, the fact that it was sprayed and the body became allergic to it, again, it's not a single thing that affects the hormone production, that affects the immune function, that affects the absorption of nutrients in food. All of it is interchangeable and connected.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
these allergies can also be affecting your hormone reabsorption and production.
Yes, there's so many things to be thinking about instead of just how do we correct the hormones by adding in herbs or supplements
Mhm.
or hormones therapy. It's
Yeah, in the beginning of the holistic healthcare industry, less was more. You start very slowly. You always started to fix the gut. I worked with greats like Adele Davis. I was a young woman when I used to meet Adele Davis in the coffee shop of the former Ambassador Hotel when she wrote her book. A lot of her premises are still accurate today. And
Mhm.
she did support the use of whey protein. That was an early thing. So she's always said, fix the gut. And when I was selling my parents liquid acidophilus, I said, oh God, would I sell this to Americans? They don't even know what yogurt is. So the fact that she lectured and everybody found out about acidophilus, my booth was swamped. But that's only because she educated them. But what I'm saying, it was a very simple approach to getting people better health. And that's what we need to do now. And by the way, if you want to make your own yogurt, it's not a big moneymaker for me. I just did it as a courtesy. I do sell a yogurt starter that my family's used when they produce the finest yogurt. I give you a video explanation of how the milk has to be treated in order to get the real starter cultures that makes a healthy yogurt grow. And if you see anything more than 2 organisms that are considered the starter cultures for yogurt, those added organisms are just contaminants. They haven't fermented anything and they don't survive in that environment.
Good to know. Good to know. Good to know.
So
Yeah.
it's all interrelated.
I like that you have your own yogurt starter. A couple of my clients since our podcasts have tried it out. Everybody loves it. So
Yeah, good.
it's
Because I did it because people were driving me crazy and I said they can't, they can't just assume and buy this starter that has spilled, names of microorganisms and I don't even know what the heck they're doing in there. They're not helping the conversion. Actually, what fermented foods are is the breakdown of components of that food that's being fermented, so your body can digest it better and absorb. That's the whole purpose of fermentation. If that's not happening, you're not getting any benefits.
it's true. It's true. It's
You know.
huge. It's huge.
Right. I think this is a very big topic. I'd really like to get some people, coming in and asking personal questions because that's the way I learned what the problems are and what people are not understanding. And I'd like to continue this. I'd like to get feedback from individuals so we can start a conversation because
Yes.
my objective is to start getting especially women, young, middle-aged, or old, into better health because we're the nurturers of the family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And absolutely the younger generations. I think we unfortunately kind of move into looking at perimenopause and beyond as being its own segment, but really looking
Mhm.
at as soon as a woman is old enough to understand about taking care of her health, I think it's time to start working on it.
Now, we have huge fertility problems. Do you know that in Los Angeles County, 20 maternity wards closed?
Whoa.
It means we're not having children.
Mm-hmm.
So that means there's, and I've done fertility shows with a doctor, local doctor, and young women are coming in. Everybody's got fertility issues. So it is a problem, whether you're young, middle-aged, or old. It's a huge problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think so. I think so. I think it's something that it's a great topic to keep going, to keep talking about. I definitely will share what kind of questions I get
Good.
from our interview, and I'm always getting them from my podcast and different things. So I look forward to keeping the conversation going. Thank you so much for having me on, Natasha. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it too, and I hope everybody learns something and benefits by our conversations.